Well, another warm morning here. Supposed to get into the 90s today. It's a beautiful morning though. You know, when I first put this fan on over the deck, I thinking that's kind of crazy. But on mornings like this, it's absolutely perfect. It creates enough of a breeze to where it's really comfortable out here and shaded from the sun. Otherwise, it would already be getting uncomfortable out here. So, just enjoying some morning time watching the horses graze out there. They'll come into the camera range pretty soon. And anyway, thought I would share a couple of things with you. And I've been thinking about bondage. And one of the scriptures that, in John, Jesus, I'll just read it, John 8, chapters 31 through 34 says, "Then said Jesus to those Jews which believed on him, If you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed. And you will know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, We be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you shall be made free? And Jesus answered them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever commits sin is the servant of sin. And one of the things he was talking about there is a life of sin, living a life of sin. Not the occasional falling into it, but the practice of continuing to sin. If you've had an experience and you're born again, you will continually make a practice of sinning. But the bondage part of it kind of caught my eye, because in Romans 8:15, he says, Paul writes, For you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. So apparently there's a spirit of bondage again to fear. Or a spirit of bondage, I'm assuming that's what he's saying. And interestingly enough, the first place any fear is mentioned in the Bible is after Adam had sinned and disobeyed God. Then their eyes were opened, they saw the flesh and hid themselves. And he told God he was afraid. So that's the first place fear came into being. And in 1 John 4:17 and 18, it says, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness. Oh, I'm sorry, that was 2 Timothy. But here in 1 John, they say, Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear has torment, and he that fears is not made perfect in love. And that word perfect means complete. So my suggestion is that if we're fearful about anything, we just have not gotten to the point yet where that love of God, and I think I'm talking about the love not for God, but the love of God, the love he gives to us, the love we receive from him. Have we really understood his love, the depth of his love? Are we resting in his love? Are we trusting in his love? Because if we truly believe that, why would we be fearful? And this really kind of ties in with the carnal mind versus the spiritual. In Romans 7, Paul says, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin." That kind of goes back to what Jesus was saying about being made free, and also what happened in the book of Genesis when Adam was talking to God and he was afraid. He had become carnal, and that was what brought on the fear. But this being sold under sin, there's a bondage there. It's bondage is slavery. And the thing we forget as Christians and don't realize as unbelievers is that we're basically slaves to that sin nature. That's what Paul is saying there in Romans chapter 7. We have been sold under sin. Well, who sold us? We didn't sell ourselves. Adam sold us. He sold us into slavery to sin by his act of disobedience. Over and over again throughout the Old Testament, there are numerous references to the Lord bringing Israel out of the bondage that they were in Egypt. And it is God and God alone that delivers us. In Exodus 20, verse 2, "I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." Deuteronomy 5:6, "I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage." Over and over again, there's the reminder that Israel didn't save themselves. God saved them. And it's always from the house of bondage. And God wants us to understand that he has brought us out of bondage. We don't yield ourselves, our members, if you will, as instruments of the bondage of sin. We yield our members of our body, if you will, to the works of righteousness in the Spirit. We walk in the Spirit. Jesus said, "Continue in my word, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." I believe he was talking not just free from sin, but free from all of the effects of sin, one of which is that fear, that spirit of fear. And we live in a world where, oh my gosh, you open up your eyes and you have no idea what's coming next. We have governments running amok. We have citizens. Sometimes you can refer to them as savages, gone crazy, just wild. That spirit of lawlessness is running rampant. A lot of natural disasters that would make you think, oh my gosh, what in the world is going on? Well, we've been told we're in the last days. We know we're in the last days. Even the unbelievers know there's something not normal going on. I think they're birth pangs. I believe with all my heart these are the birth pangs Jesus was talking about in the Gospels when he was warning about the end times. We don't have much longer when he will come back. And with birth pangs, you can always know they will become more frequent and they will become more intense. And if we're walking with that carnal mind and we're not keeping ourselves renewed, we will be fearful, because that carnal mind is one of fear. We will submit to the fear. We don't need to be afraid. A believer, Paul says, you have not received that spirit of bondage again to fear, but we've received that spirit of adoption whereby we cry, Abba, Father. So I would say, as for myself, that's something I want to focus on today, is that I don't need to be fearful no matter what the news is. Not that I watch the news anymore. I believe we're affected by things that we allow into our head, and there's not a whole lot of good out there. But no matter what the news is, we can walk in peace, and we can walk in the knowledge of His love, which casts out fear, and focus on receiving that love. That's something I've known the Lord for decades, and one of my prayers for myself as well as other believers is that we learn to receive His love, and that God will give us a fresh revelation of that love. So we can be watchful and waiting for Him and praying with confidence and not fearful. He doesn't want us living in fear. Over and over again, He has said, fear not. So that's going to be my challenge today, is not walking in fear, not walking in concern, not walking in alarm. How often do we hear the words alarming news or this alarming development? Well, alarming means creating fear out of a vision or whatever of a threat. So, no fear, just faith and love. We need to focus on the Lord and on what He wants us to do and how He wants us to respond to what goes on, not only in our personal lives, but in what's happening in our nation, in our cities, in our towns. And we, as believers, we need to get a burden for those who don't know the Lord and ask God to give us an eternal perspective on things. So with that, I will leave you and Romans 8:15, for you have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. The one who gave us that spirit of adoption was God Himself. So be blessed today. Walk in the love that He has for you, and the mercies and the grace. And ask God, if you're feeling like He's abandoned you, ask Him to give you a fresh revelation of that love.